Welcome to the Arkansas Development Finance Authority's Home Training and Certification. We're going to be going through a number of modules covering all of the basic home regulations, and in addition to that, all of the ADFA specific design or requirements that you would need to know to be able to administer ADFA funded home funds for you. A little bit about the course. This was something that was put together with ADFA and also staff from ICF International. I'm Les Warner. I'm with ICF International, and I will be the host of these training sessions throughout each of the modules. The basic goal of this course is to try to make sure that you have a solid working knowledge of the home program rules, so those are the federal HUD rules, but that you also have a working knowledge of the ADFA specific policies. So the funds that ADFA is distributing are received from HUD, and with those are the applied the home regulations, but each of the recipients is then deciding how they're going to use those home funds and laying out some specific compliance requirements, minimums, maximums, those sorts of things. So we'll be making sure that you understand what the home rule itself says, but you'll also need to know specifically what Arkansas is requiring for you. We'll also be talking about the steps that need to be completed to maintain home compliance and working through what the eligible activities are and those activity-specific requirements that go with each of those activities. So our first chapter is simply providing an introduction to this series and also talking about the purpose of this. And I will mention that these chapters correspond with the chapters in the ADFA manual, which you will have been provided through a link along with these modules. So a little bit about a background about the Arkansas Development Finance Authority, which we'll be calling ADFA for an abbreviation as we move forward. It was created on March 1st of 1985, and they are designated as the participating jurisdiction. So in other words, for the funds that the state of Arkansas has been designated to receive through a formula allocation determined by HUD, those funds are flowing to ADFA, who is functioning as the state's participating jurisdiction. The mission of the organization itself is to assist low-income and underserved Arkansans to finance, develop, and preserve affordable housing. And that meshes really well with the requirements and the mission and goal of the home program itself. And then, of course, ADFA is partnering with recipients to meet that mission, whether it's developer, whether it is a state recipient who's receiving some of those funds. So we'll talk about those definitions as we move forward in this course. So the ADFA home certification process was put in place with the goal of making sure that each of the recipients of ADFA's home funds had an adequate understanding of the home requirements and the state-specific requirements so that they would be successful in administrating those home funds. So to receive your ADFA home certification, you'll need to complete the training modules that have been posted together on the ADFA site. Once you have completed those training modules and feel that you are ready to take the exam, you would then contact your ADFA representative about getting the home certification exam. In this case, because the modules are posted, you can work with those resources for as long as you need to prior to requesting that exam. So some recommendations about how to use this manual. So the state's manual has been put together for all of the folks who would be receiving home funds, whether it be what we're going to be calling a state recipient or someone who's working in partnership or on behalf of that state recipient might also be a developer who's directly receiving those funds. And depending on the specific activity, so we have general rules that apply to all of our home activities, but we also have for each of the 4 eligible home activities some activity-specific rules. And so our modules have been kind of broken up to follow that we will provide you some general administrative rules that are specific to the home program, and then also by each of the activities. And that's also how the certification exams have been laid out. If you look at Exhibit 1.1 within the ADFA manual, it will lay out the relevant chapters for each of these tracks, essentially. So you'll see on the slide that based on the activity that you are undertaking, there would be specific chapters, modules that you would need to complete. So everyone's going to complete the administrative overview, the general requirements for the program, and then some of our sort of administrative record keeping, the other federal requirements that are chapters 9 through 14. But then based on the specific activity, there is an activity chapter. So for instance, if I'm doing a homeowner occupied rehab, chapter 4 is going to provide those activity-specific regulations that I'm going to need to know. So depending on the specific test certification that you are seeking will determine the number of modules that you are going to be needing to be completing, and also those that you'll be tested on for that certification. So as part of that, everyone's going to learn the operations and policy rules that ADFA has put in place for the specific activities. Also, we're going to be training you on the home regulations themselves. Those are found at 24 CFR, which stands for Code of Federal Regulations, Part 92. So that's where all of the federal home regulations are to be found, and that's the basis for much of this training. We also would really encourage you to work with the ADFA staff as appropriate. So when you're unsure on how some of this information applies to a specific project that you have in mind, or you need a little bit of additional help on that, we would really recommend that you talk with the ADFA staff, and particularly if you are a recipient of home funds, that as you have questions that you ask before taking a particular direction, to make sure that everyone agrees that that's the correct way to apply these requirements.